Okay, I think I'll be starting, and we'll see if some people join afterward. So welcome everybody to the third webinar in the between the Resample Retention and MES-CoBraD project. We already had two previous webinars that are available on YouTube and in our project's websites. So today we're going to talk about the open challenges in digital research, insights and experiences from 3 different EU-funded projects. So we'll be here until 12, and here is the agenda for today. So first the introduction that I'm doing right now, and then we'll have a presentation from each project. So Serge Autexier, Alice Luraschi, and Agni Delvinioti. Sorry for your names if I'm not fully fluent. For the Resample project, who are going to talk about integrating a novel COPD and complex chronic conditions disease management solution into healthcare. For the retention project, Mercedes Rivas Lasarte, Irina, Nicolae, and Christina Nanou will talk about harnessing AI for heart failure, enhancing patient care through explainable and ethical AI in the retention project. And for MES-CoBraD, Francesca Mopurgo will talk at the intersection of medical ethics and AI ethics, the MES-CoBraD's ETI model. After this presentation, we'll have a guided discussions with the speakers. So we have 2 to 3 questions that they will answer. And after that, we will have an open discussion with the audience. If during the presentations you have any questions, put them in the chat or in the Q&A, and we will keep them for the end. And we hope this part will be interactive, so we strongly encourage you to participate. Thank you for joining. Oh, by the way, I am Marie Nab from Hope. I'm the Resample Communication Officer. And now I will leave the floor to Serge for Resample.
Yes, good morning, everybody. I'll share my slides. Hope you can see this. So good morning. I'll be presenting this project together with my colleagues from Gemelli. It's about the Resample project, and just to start into the topic, so we'll give a bit of a background on the project itself and then the challenges we faced and we're still facing sometimes, maybe since we are still running. And then have a brief review on trustworthiness, ethics, and risks, and the use of AI and related topics. So the Resample project itself, so as Maria already indicated, it's about the COPD patients with chronic conditions and comorbidities, and to have an AI infrastructure that helps to do predictions of exacerbations and deteriorations of the conditions, and at the same time have tools and techniques to empower the patients to manage their disease, including the chronic conditions and the comorbidities, and by this fit into the healthcare system and have a better exchange between the clinicians and the patients and the monitoring and the self-management in general. So this is the overall, one of the overall pictures, so that we have the patients using a patient app where it's meant that helps the patient to manage the disease, where it's responding to questions, to monitor the status, and at the same time, all this data is collected together with the hospital data about the patient, and this is the basis for risk predictions that are shown on the left in the dashboard that the clinicians are using to assess the situation and the risks, and together with the patient in shared care decision making, make decisions how to behave in everyday life for the patient, and this configures the virtual companionship program for the patient that is then part of the patient app in everyday life, and that should better help the whole self-management and in close interaction with the clinicians and the predictions based on the available data. So this is how the actual procedure works, how to do this machine learning based risk predictions, so that we have the patient data from several sources. We train the machine learning algorithms to do these risk predictions and use these trained risk predictive models to provide specific AI services, and we'll come back to this in a second. And especially we want to have this directly integrated in the patient treatment, so when the patient sits together with the clinician in a visit at the hospital and then can use that. Of course, this should be continuous, run through cycles, so we get more data over time. This improves the models, this improves the services, and then improves the treatment while we go through these different stages. And we are cooperatives. We have 3 pilot sites where this is deployed. So we have all the patient data that should stay in these places. So that's the hospital clinic in Rome, Gemelli. We have Enschede in the Netherlands. Sorry for the typo here. That's MST. And we have the hospital in Tartu in Estonia. So all this, the data from the patient apps, but also the local hospital data is collected inside the hospital sites. And we have the risk predictive models trained on locally on these sites, but also collaboratively in a federated learning approach, so that we can take advantage of all the data in all places to have the best possible models, hopefully. That's our setup. And with this, I will hand over to my colleague Agni to present the challenges. Agni?
Hello, everyone. Sorry, I was just switching. So, good morning. I'm a data scientist working in Gemelli Hospital. So, I will discuss briefly enough the open challenges, or the main open challenges we're facing, both in technical and operational terms. So, from the beginning of the project, we faced many difficulties in harmonizing the data and make it available for the entire sample platform. And all this process required very high effort in integrating the system in the premises of every hospital. At the same time, the questionnaires are filled in daily by the patients, but on a voluntary basis. On the other side, from the operational point of view, clinicians have to be engaged to use the digital tools and analytics we are proposing. And also clinicians have to spend more time to follow the patients, monitor them, and perform additional visits. So, to make this integration possible, we provided an infrastructure that is using HL7 FHIR standard, and interfaces built using OpenAI 3. So practically, a dedicated module is deployed on an edge node with a Docker infrastructure. All the data remains in the hospital premises, in the intranet, and privacy is respected. So as you can see, many different types of information is exchanged and pushed into the common data repository of the project to make possible the federated modeling. However, still problems are present. So data is not available always in a digital format, or the format is different compared to what the common data model of the project expected. So here in Gemelli Hospital, for this reason, we set up a dedicated COPD data mart. So we implemented an ETL process that extracts all the data related to resample patients and stores them in a dedicated database. At the same time, clinicians use a web app we developed internally to enroll the patients and evaluate if they're eligible for the study. As you can see on the right, the data mart includes many different kinds of information, from baseline characteristics until spirometry and hospitalization data. So another challenge that we faced and make us a little bit struggle with the whole project was the main target. So resample aims to predict exacerbations, to model and present exacerbation risk to the clinicians. So to do that, we used practically the answers that the patients provide related to their symptoms daily, following the COPD protocol. That is a publication that I can share later, that is not here. So practically patients pass through a stable state towards a deviation state and later on exacerbation phases based on the answers they provide, and based on the symptoms on the answers to the specific symptoms, we set up a threshold that makes sure that the patient goes through these states. However, to make this possible, the patient has to keep on answering to the questionnaires and be adherent. Unfortunately, obviously, this didn't happen because patients didn't reply every day, and it's normal in a study that can last more than a year. So what happened is that many patients were getting stuck in certain phases, and also this was a problem because from the ethics point of view, there was a risk to expose non-compliant information to both patients and clinicians. So to face that, we went a step further and we tried to integrate missing data handling processes in the whole algorithm design. And as you can see, the very simplified design diagram you saw before became these three diagrams, very complex ones, but guarantee that for sure the patient goes through all the states, even though the data is not provided. Thank you. Now I will pass the floor to my colleague Alice, that will talk about operational challenges.
Yes, thank you, everybody. And indeed, what we are going to see now is how do we really integrate it into healthcare, into the healthcare from the operational point of view. Indeed, what we have to always keep in mind is that technology is just an instrument, and the developed solution are tools, not the final goals. The final goal is actually, sorry. Okay, the final goal is our end users, both healthcare specialists and patients, and how they use the tools, how the tools support them, indeed, to ensure the resample solutions won't become just a technological exercise, but will develop a solution that is useful for the end users. All the partners dedicated significant effort into co-design activities with users. Indeed, we involve the end users during the whole development phase, from the very beginning when we collected the requirements that guided the development of a low-fidelity prototype. Then such prototype was then analyzed with them, with the end users, and improved. Even after the first release, the project proposal included several iterations that are new releases of the solution, changed based on patients and healthcare professionals' feedbacks collected both in a qualitative way and in a quantitative analysis of the actual usage of the solution. And of course, this process was followed both in the first observational study and in the virtual companionship program. Once the solution was developed, it has to be actually used. And the more innovative the solution, the more difficulties it will be to integrate it into current reality. But ensuring that the solution can be integrated in the setting is our role too. Of course, we developed several support material and organized training sessions, not only with the healthcare professionals before the study beginning, but also with the patient. Indeed, we plan to have a specific training session with each patient during the enrollment, when we explain how to use the app and where we let the patient do the first tasks next to us. Moreover, we deeply analyze the setting where the tool needs to be integrated and work to a remapping of the processes to identify specific roles and responsibilities for each study task and so on, to ensure that the instrument could be effectively incorporated into the hospital's operational flows. Indeed, as also Agni already said, people involved already have a dense and organized routine. This kind of solutions is a workload increase and requires a change in their daily life, actually, in their daily tasks. So this is it. What you see here is the new patient journey that we designed, and as you can see, this patient journey is really connected to the journey of each healthcare professional. So in every point of the patient journey, we have identified the role that it is the one who best suits to that task, and we identified several responsibilities for the tasks that are needed. Of course, as always in medicine, ethics is always a priority. For ease of reasoning, here we have tried to map the activities carried out in the well-known four principles of medical ethics: autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice. And just not going in depth in each of them, what we really focused on as a consortium is, first of all, talking about autonomy. We're really focused on a better engagement of the patient in their care pathway with the onboarding phase that I just explained before, so explaining them how to use the application, but also improving the understanding of the pathology thanks to some educational contents that we send to the patient through the application, and also an improvement engagement thanks to shared decision-making pathway that the patient has with the healthcare professional, also improving the relationship between the patient and the healthcare professional. And we also support the patient in the self-management. Another thing where we really focused as a consortium is the privacy compliance and the privacy preserving. As you already saw, thanks to my colleague Serge and Agni, we have a privacy preserving architecture, but it is not the only thing that we have. Actually, the whole resample process is privacy compliant. And of course, we also have AI models that are transparent and accurate. And the AI outcomes are integrated in a clinical dashboard that was co-designed with the clinicians. Of course, just to be honest, we are still in the project and we have to improve how these AI models are shown to the healthcare professionals. Indeed, we are going to have some sessions with them to improve it. And another thing is that, of course, this is a project that involves 3 European pilot sites with diverse COPD disease stages and complex chronic conditions. So what we hope is that what we developed could be useful for the whole COPD population. Of course, the risk of digital divide is there, as for all the digital medicine that is going on now. And thank you very much for your attention. Now I pass the floor to Retention Project.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, thank you very much. I am Mercedes Rivas. I'm a cardiologist and heart failure specialist from Spain, from Madrid, and I'm going to speak about the retention project with my colleagues, Irina Nicolae from Siemens, she's a research engineer, and Christina Nanou, she's a lawyer from Eunomia. So as many of you may know, heart failure is not a simple disease. In fact, it's not a disease, it's a complex syndrome, and many diseases can lead to heart failure. So we have multiple phenotypes of patients, and this syndrome is frequent because it affects 2% of the population and is a real challenge for our health systems because it's the first cause of hospitalization in patients older than 65. So, because this is a very complex disease, simple models are unable to explain the prognosis of heart failure. So, the goal of retention is to improve the prognosis of our heart failure patients, and we are also including heart transplant and patients with left ventricular assist devices. But this is not the first trial that has attempted to include telemedicine in the care of heart failure patients, and many of the previous trials have failed to demonstrate an improvement in prognosis. So we are trying to do things a little bit different. We not only include baseline characteristics and simple measures as weight or blood pressure, but we are giving to our patients multiple tools like blood pressure, a pulse oximeter, they are monitoring their temperature, they have a smartwatch, which is collecting continuous data about physical activity, sleep. We are also monitoring their humidity and temperature condition at home and also their environmental conditions. So we are gathering multiple and continuous measures, and we are randomizing our patients into two groups. The intervention group, where the clinician is aware of all these measurements, and the control group, where the clinician is blinded to all these measures. Of course, the patient, because this is a simple blinded trial, the patient doesn't know in which group it is. We are having several visits during 18 months, and we are feeding our AI models with all this information. And the ultimate goal is to have algorithms who help us to do a better care for our patients and to predict decompensations and hospitalizations. But of course, we are facing many challenges. The patient has to be a patient with a certain literacy, digital literacy, and he has also trust in digital systems and AI. And also we are facing some challenges between clinicians and technicians because as clinicians, we should also trust AI, and we should make AI transparent and explainable, and this is something my colleagues are going to speak about. So, Irina?
Thank you. Yes, on this last note, I will continue. So how can AI be made transparent and understandable for clinicians? And we need to think about at the same time to ensure clinicians understand AI and the reasoning behind the model-specific conclusions. So we take the approach in retention for AI development for a collaborative design where we use interdisciplinary collaboration, engaging different domain experts like AI developers, clinicians, policymakers, and ethicists in all stages of AI development. We use the approach of a continuous feedback loop and iterative development to refine models, address biases, and ethical concerns. Next slide. Now, for going deeper into our approach for explainable AI, we want to build AI explanations which are clear, with a clear visual and textual interpretations, where the clarity for the type of presentation is validated priorly by clinicians. We complement with clarifying sessions with clinicians to support in effectively understanding AI explanations and how the system arrived at its decision. We are also planning to validate the explanations via measurable metrics that we have presented in a recent research paper, conference paper. And we are working further on this approach, and we faced challenges that we are trying to overcome. The first challenge is the complexity of the data models. So we know that the complexity and high dimensionality of healthcare data makes it challenging to build models that are both accurate and interpretable. The second point is the lack of standardization in explanation methods. There is no current universal standard for interpreting AI models, especially complex ones like deep learning, where the explanation techniques are still missing or may not work well with all types of models. The third challenge is the lack of existing intuitive techniques for AI explanations. The current AI explanations techniques are not user-friendly and they need translation into common language, which we are trying to build. And we observe the need for them to be simplified and contextualized in a way that makes sense to clinicians without oversimplifying or missing important nuances. We can dive into this later on, and I will hand over to Christina for the ethical considerations when building trustworthy AI.
Thank you, Irina. So the explainability requirements we're discussing correspond to satisfying the key ethical requirement of transparency, which stems from the principle of explicability. This is one of the 4 principles established within the EU framework for trustworthy AI, which resonate with the fundamental bioethical principles of beneficence, non-maleficence, autonomy, and justice. These principles are of paramount importance, particularly in the healthcare context, where AI introduces novel ethical challenges and complexities, both in relation to the clinician as the end user and in the broader dynamic between clinicians and their patients. Within our work, we have recognized transparency as deeply interconnected with other trustworthy AI requirements, both reinforcing and operationalizing their implementation. Next slide, please. So transparency comprises 3 elements: traceability, tracking decisions, datasets, and procedures to ensure data quality and reliable outcomes; explainability in the stricter sense, which is about making AI-generated recommendations clear and understandable for end users; and communication, ensuring users are aware of the system's capabilities and limitations. Now, in acknowledging the crucial role of transparency for AI adoption in healthcare applications, we explored key metrics that support this requirement and linked them to the ethical considerations that are relevant for our project. Now, for clinicians, understanding the AI's rationale enhances their capacity to integrate AI recommendations into the clinical judgment without compromising the professional autonomy. Making sure that AI serves as a supportive tool that preserves clinicians' decision-making authority is crucial for maintaining the integrity of patient care. Providing clear guidelines for AI usage also fosters informed consent by ensuring that clinicians are well informed about the system they are employing and can convey this information to their patients. To address these issues, the Explanation Comprehensibility Index measures how well AI decisions are explained to different users, combining clarity scores with user feedback and adjusting the complexity of explanations based on the audience's expertise. The AI tutorial page provides step-by-step explanations using text, diagrams, and graphs, with the complexity adapted again to the user's expertise. Now, building and maintaining trust in the system requires ongoing validation of the system's clarity, reliability, and user-friendliness. The user trust score, combined with the explanation comprehensibility index, uses feedback surveys to identify and correct issues that might undermine confidence in AI. This feedback loop ensures continuous improvement, making AI more trustworthy and reducing risks of harm that could stem from misinterpretation, over reliance, inadequate understanding, or biases embedded in the system's outputs. This process also holds AI developers and healthcare end users accountable for maintaining and improving the system. Lack of clarity, for example, regarding the mechanisms, capabilities, and constraints of machine learning algorithms may cause physicians to excessively depend on or unquestioningly adhere to AI suggestions, introducing thus new forms of paternalism or presenting a new argument for defensive medicine, both being long-standing ethical concerns in medical ethics. In this direction, comprehensive documentation of the AI's processes measured through relevant metrics also help clinicians fully grasp the limitations and proper use of the system. Moreover, the AI performance and confidence scores show how often the model is correct and how confident it is in its predictions, which may indirectly highlight its strengths and weaknesses. The clinical decision concordance rate now measures the alignment between AI recommendations and clinical best practices. This metric could help clinicians assess AI reliability, building trust when alignment is strong, and raise warnings when discrepancies appear. So, moving on to the next slide, this work has been conducted as a preliminary step for a phased implementation of the ALT-AI assessment. In the context that is of first understanding the normative framework and its demands, then identifying the challenges and needs of our project, and investigate and implement solutions, going into the end to proceed with the final assessment. One point that I wish to highlight regarding this process is the importance of engaging all the various roles and expertise that different partners support in the project. This helps gaining a shared understanding of the project's AI-related ethical implications, encourages active engagement across disciplines to actually address these considerations, to effectively customize the assessment to project-specific needs where this is necessary, to better, again, spot our limitations and find solutions or provide appropriate justifications in this regard. And finally, to ensure good reporting, tracking, that is, how requirements are met or where challenges remain. So with this, I would like to conclude my presentations. Thank you. And invite Francesca Mapurco from MES-CoBraD for their interesting presentation at the intersection of medical ethics and AI ethics, the SI model.
Thank you. Just one moment. I'm going to share my presentation. Here we are. So, hello to everyone. I'm Francesca Mapurgo from Cybernetics Lab, and I'll be presenting the ethics of AI model for the MES-CoBraD project. We call it ETI. So, just a few words about the project identity. So, as you probably may know, neurological disorders are a real problem in Europe, and millions of Europeans of all ages live with brain disorders that threaten their quality of life and also impact the sustainability of health systems. And MES-CoBraD is about neurological disorders. What we wanted to do, because MES-CoBraD ended in January this year, was to improve the quality of life of patients, caregivers, and of course the society at large, improving early diagnosis and achieving a more accurate prognosis and therapeutic outcomes. How do we want to do this? Identifying and assessing real-world clinical and social information from patients and their caregivers, and combining this information, this real-world data from diverse populations with diverse backgrounds. This is extremely important, and we had specific KPIs for this, for patients recruitment. Implementing cost-efficient and fast protocols, and also using technical innovation, AI, and expert systems to achieve a real personalized healthcare. Of course, the challenges are not only clinical, but also technological and research, because this project is not only about healthcare, but it's about disruptive technologies, about AI applied to healthcare. And speaking about the key challenges for health systems, of course, as we also heard in the preceding presentations, we have a problem in various areas of healthcare of underdiagnosis, delayed diagnosis, misdiagnosis, or even suboptimal or contraindicated treatment. And inside MES-CoBraD, we thought that to overcome these difficulties, these challenges, there was the need for a multidisciplinary approach and team, of course, to put together data and experiences from various disciplines and approaches. So how did we do? How did we implement this approach? We started from a clinical interview where we gathered patients' data. We had 5 hospitals around Europe and also inside Europe, in Israel, 1. Then we gathered all data and we placed them on an edge tool where multiple sources of real-world data were entered. We used AI and advanced analytics to analyze this data. And we fed the results of this analysis to an expert system that was used for clinical guidance and support. This in a multidisciplinary environment where, as I mentioned before, different experts from various areas around Europe could interact and together achieve the best possible diagnosis for of course, for their patients. Here you can see the abstract system architecture. So the first phase, of course, is data gathering from clinical databases and from patient interviews. The data are placed into the Edge data lake. They are depersonalized, of course, and then they are placed into a central data lake where advanced analytics and artificial intelligence can use the data and deliver their outputs. Coming to ethical considerations, of course, to design and develop a system like this is of paramount importance to to ensure that AI and machine learning systems respect human rights, privacy, and societal values. Of course, the issue of possible biases is a fundamental one. So the problem of the quality and representativeness of dataset is one of the most important. And being into an healthcare field, also the medical ethics principles, beneficence, non-maleficence, justice, and autonomy must be taken into account. The challenges could be both from the clinicians and from the patient's point of view, real challenging. For example, there could be the case that the system could infringe human autonomy and dignity because of the black box nature of machine learning algorithms. We heard in the retention project, for example, the presentation, how is important the transparency for systems like this. But of course, also the system could be perceived as some sort of authority, giving rise to automation biases into clinicians. There is the huge problem of the responsibility and accountability, because if the clinicians use the outcomes of the system, but the system is not transparent, it's questionable whether they are really accountable for their decisions, even if, of course, from legal point of view, they are. And also there is the problem of the use of the system, because how to take decisions when AI is inserted into the relationship doctor-patient is not something that is void of problems. Of course, also from the patient side, there are the same challenges reflected in another way, because it is essential also to communicate patients how AI would be used, how the rights will be ensured, so that trust in systems and in their clinicians is preserved. For these reasons, we developed an ethical framework inside the MES-CoBraD project that lies at the intersection of medical ethics and AI ethics, and that takes into account, or at least tries to, all the issues that I mentioned before. In particular, of course, we based our work on the 4 principles of bioethics and on the trustworthy guidelines for AI that you can see here. So the pillars of accountability, transparency, trustworthiness, and obviousness. And we categorized the trustworthy guidelines under the principles of bioethics. And from this work, we derived a series of ethical requirements that we used for the design and for the development of the AI system. So the AI model is a model that has at its base a selection of values and principles, a co-creative selection of values and principles. In this case, of course, being into a healthcare field, we chose to use the bioethics principles. But, for example, if applied into different fields, say cybersecurity, for example, the principles could vary. And from these principles, risks are derived in collaboration with field experts and, in this case, clinicians. a first set of high-level requirements are derived, and then they are operationalized and transformed into technical requirements. So, of course, the objectives are many. The first one is to set up a tailored ethics standard of AI in healthcare, then define a framework for the design of AI technologies in healthcare and in COBRAD assessment and management, analyze the reasons that could lead to an ethical misalignment and generate risks or cause negative impacts on patients, and finally to secure legal and ethical standards, ensuring that international codes of medical ethics and of practices for artificial intelligence are followed. In this, the outcomes, positive outcomes could be many, but one of the main one, in my opinion, is to reassure stakeholders that the tool is not going to cause ethical concerns, because we do this kind of work not only for research, but also for exploitation. So we hope to use the MES-CoBraD platform and expert system outside, of course, of the project. The time model has a cyclic nature, and so it iterates through all the project. Only the final phase is the assessment. So I want to stress the fact that the time model and also tools like this should not only come at the final phase of the project to place an ethical compliance mark, no? But they should enter into all the phases of the project development. In fact, in this project, we try to adopt a true ethics by design approach and to transform the ethical requirements that may not be understood. So there is a quite difficult part in which ethicists and technical partners and also medical partners, of course, should interact, should talk to achieve a mutual comprehension of what, for example, a specific requirement means and how to translate it into technical terms. And then, of course, there is also the aspect of the system use, because even if the system is designed ethically, when it is used by clinicians, there may be doubts, dilemmas that needs to be coped with. So, coming to the main recommendations and lessons learned, we found that for sure training is a fundamental aspect. The MES-CoBraD platform is designed for clinicians, and we think that training tools should be incorporated into the platform so that they are immediately available, and we avoid the possible misuses of the platform due to uncomprehension of its working. It's important that human overseers are appointed, because probably we will never achieve a complete system reliability, but also human overseers may fail, and there are interesting papers about this, about human overseers introducing biases, further biases, when they assess the work of an artificial intelligence system in healthcare. So also implementing automated routines with alerting in case of ethical misalignments could be a good idea. Also, using AI in healthcare could lead to an excessive deterministic approach, where patients are reduced to data, no? And so it could be interesting to introduce also a way to gather data about how the patient feels, about how he reacts to therapies, and to transform also these aspects into data to be fed into the system. Of course, the part about the internalization of ethics through all the process. And finally, the impacts on clinicians and on their approach to care must be attentively monitored to understand how the day-to-day clinical practice is modified by the introduction of AI. It could be for the better, but even also not. And as we, for the principle of beneficence, want to develop tools that ameliorate the life and the outcomes of patients, this is of paramount importance. And that's all on my part. Now I will give the floor to my colleagues for questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Francesca. Thank you all for these very interesting presentations. So now we're going to move toward the guided discussion. So the first question I would like to ask you is how to integrate ethics within a project strongly linked to healthcare technology. And if we can do that between 10 and 15 minutes. And I don't know who would like to start on this topic.
I can start. And I think that ethics could be perceived by clinicians, by researchers in as something impositive, something that comes to disturb their already difficult work. And so, in my opinion, it's really important to understand that ethics instead can ameliorate the way patients are engaged, react to therapies or to suggestions. And it's a dialogue that must be established between ethicists and clinical partners to ensure that a true cooperation is achieved in this sense.
Yes, Christina. Thank you, Francesca.
Thank you both. I would like also to answer to the question by introducing several challenges that the Horizon European founded projects may face. And this is to somehow make a distinction between a compliance, legal and ethical compliance with more bureaucratic processes, to what is to the difference of incorporating ethics as an internal part of the research that is being conducted, of asking questions that have to do with how we build our applications, etc., and how they will affect people, and etc. And these things usually are not distinct. Also, in cases of tasks and work package structure, we should keep that in mind, because also this affects the time we have when projects have a very much technical and clinical work. You must make room for these distinct ways of integrating ethics and compliance. This is from my side.
Yeah, also following what Christina was saying is that it is very interesting also the work that you both have done in your projects. And it is very also true that Usually ethics is also very connected, of course, to privacy, that it is a very, very focused theme now in worldwide. But sometimes also due to the VP structure, actually, I totally agree. Sometimes we really focus on the privacy preserving architecture and so on. That is, of course, a need. But sometimes we don't have room for all the other things that we have to focus on for ethics. This is something that I noticed also in other projects. Indeed, now we have a lot of attention to the privacy preserving and so on, but not, for instance, enough for the explainability of the AI or for the diversity of the population or all these other things that are not really privacy, but there is part of ethics.
Yeah, maybe if I can also add, to me it looks like there are different aspects we have to consider when we want to really integrate ethics. So the one part is really on the methodology. So how Francesca very well explained, so it has to be by design, and we have to think about it in all the phases of the project and work packages. But more practically, aside bureaucracy and also obligations, legal and everything, I think to me it looks more like there has to be more room for the users to provide their opinion. So, for example, in Resample, we in the second work package in the beginning, we did a lot on that. So what they call user studies. So let's say how, because privacy is a concept very specific. So we all assume that the data of everyone shouldn't be exposed. Instead, maybe for one user, something is important, for another is not. So I think it's very important also from an ethics point of view to understand what is important for the user. If, it's some things are compliant for him or not, what are the needs, probably.
Thank you. Yes, Francesca?
I wanted to ask me, I hope that I pronounced correctly the names, but when you say users, you mean clinicians or you mean patients?
Well, it's both, because we develop tools for both. So we have to make possible all this digital health concept. All the stakeholders that participate in the clinical process have to be, have their how you say, their way to interact in a digital form. So it's both patients. For now, we can focus on patient clinicians because it's also the hospital, like as a administration that has to transform to host all these digital processes.
So you suggest that we derive values from interviews to the stakeholders. So instead of doing a prescriptive, using a prescriptive approach, when we say these are the values, these are the principles, and from this we derive requirements, you suggest that we do it the other way around. We try to understand what are the values, what are the principles that the users already adopt and build on them.
Yeah, my idea was the combination actually, because when you start the project, you don't know anything, and it takes a lot of time to do interviews and engage the people. It's really hard. We try to do both coaching and diaries and a lot of different kinds of approaches, but it's hard to engage the patients and the clinicians that are already a little bit skeptical about all these new things that we're presenting. So, but I think the framework you present, so the both of you, is very useful that, who designs can have in mind and then can elaborate maybe the single component. So I don't think that we have to switch. I think we have to combine.
But
Yes.
thank you, but
If I may add, because I'm a clinician, so I completely agree with you. And in retention, there has been a lot of work working with us, with clinicians, to try to do a friendly platform, and also with patients. And we have been doing interviews and also questionnaires to patients, but in their daily life and also in our daily life as clinicians. So it's different. So when you start the study, you see that maybe the burden you have been thinking it's not, it's more. So we have been encountering some patients that are dropping the study. Hopefully they are few, but I think this is common in every project of this kind. No, you have said that the questionnaires were not filled by the patients every day as you expected, because once is the theory, and then the other thing is the integrating these platforms and this technology into patients' daily life and for a very long period of time. So we have to try to balance more what we think it's interesting for our patients and for improving their prognosis, and what they really feel it's are their needs and their hopes, and yes, what they expect.
Thank you, Serge, and then Alicia.
Yes, I was just wanted to add on what Agni said also with the user involvement. So the user involvement is so it has this ethical dimension, but it's also that we design a system that is meeting the, let's say, that is understandable by the end users, so both clinicians and so on. So user-centered design is an important aspect here, and it has, of course, this ethical dimension. So that, I would like maybe to emphasize is that if we would have methodologies to apply or to include ethical considerations in the whole phases of the project from the beginning. So and that so have first the awareness of all the people involved in the project, both those that are developing solutions, but also those that are dealing with the patients and so on. And that we can also reflect on this in the different phases of the project, so that we have it as a continuous workflow that is going through all the parts. I think that would be useful. There are some of these methods existing to some extent for care developments, but to having something that is an established standard, whatever, published somewhere, and that you can just take as a tool and you develop it like you would do, for software development. So my background in software is in software development. We have different standards and norms how our processes have to be organized so that we have a reliable, trustworthy system in the end. And we just go through these processes. And if we would have something like this also for the ethical considerations that we could just apply, that would be very useful.
Yeah, totally agree with you, Serge. And also coming back to what Francesca was saying from prescriptive principles or others, I think that as Agni was saying, we did a lot on user-centered design and so on. But it is important also the formalization. Actually, I found very, very useful what you both did in your projects. That is the formalization of, because we did it, we formalized a lot in the design of the software of the solution. We did a lot in change management, but talking about, and in privacy, that it was what I said. But talking about ethics. We did it implicitly. We haven't really formalized something, while it is really interesting because it is important to involve everyone, but then it is also important to formalize the results. Because then you have a document, as you both did, if I correctly understood, where you can refer to. So it is, I found it very interesting of your work, and thank you for sharing.
You
to
can go,
you,
Francesca.
and yeah, and yeah, I wanted to ask, but when you analyzed user requirements, did you find any value conflicts or misalignments between users intended as patients and users intended as clinicians, or everyone agreed?
No, of course, sorry, Mercedes, you were going.
No, you can go.
Sorry. Yeah, of course, there were some disalignment that it is maybe more connected to what Mercedes was saying before as well, that, for instance, the patient is also, of course, sees the values in the relationship, of course. The patients are in need of talk with someone to ask questions, while clinicians would like to do it, but they have their working hours and lots of things to do. So of course there are more of the main values. We are more or less the same, because in our experience, at least, also clinicians would like to have this improved engagement of the patient and so on. But how to actually implement the values of both were quite different. And actually, one of the challenge was to find something that is in between. Of course, I think that we succeed in something and maybe failed in others, but yes, we found some disalignments.
Yeah,
This
maybe
is really interesting. Sorry.
maybe if I add, I don't know, maybe only regarding patients, there were some I mean, clinicians, I think more or less are more in the same line. Instead, patients, I remember, for example, because we propose a lot of things in lifestyle changing and so on. It was totally different. Also, about we did interviews about the sharing of the data. There were patients really open, like, okay, just use whatever if you can help me. Instead, there were people that they didn't want that, or I think the level of interaction is different that they would like to have. So it's not always the same. So for the patients, has to be more personalized, the care. It cannot be, at least for COPD, what we have seen, that they are quite old and so on. Maybe for heart failure, it's different because you have younger and I don't know.
No, it's more or less the same. My question was, have you collected yet feedback on patients that are enrolled in your projects or not yet?
The end? No, not yet, because we haven't ended the project yet.
Yes,
So
but are you planning to collect in the middle of the study or not, or only at the end?
Yeah. No, also in the middle, indeed. Also, for instance, we had two phases of the study. One that is observational and one that is more interventional. Talking about the observational one, we also had already in the proposal designed a few iterations of the solutions based on the feedbacks. And also coming back to what we all were saying, for instance, one of the things is questionnaires are too many, for instance. So we raised some of them, and so yes, we already had some feedbacks, but not enough on the second phase that is started not many months ago.
I'm going to jump in because I feel you already moved to the second questions and second part of the discussion. So I'll ask this formally and then you can continue. The second question was how to integrate the patient's point of view into the development of AI for healthcare, and how, and who are we leaving behind with the implementation of AI into healthcare. So I think, Alicia, you already started to answer for example, but
What personally I am really interested in is the work. We had a very brief meeting the three project of us, and we already started to talk about it, but maybe it will be interesting for everybody, the work that retention did on the explainability of the AI. And for instance, talking about them, I know that you were asking for the patient point of view, but for the explainability of the AI, actually, we had some sessions with the clinicians, but we had never involved patients in it, and they are not even visible to patients. It was a choice to make them visible only to clinicians. I don't know what's the point of view of the other projects and what you have done on it, because I saw that you had put a lot of effort on it.
Yes, Christina.
So, except if Irina, if you wish to comment on this first, I just want to make some clarifications for our work. First of all, it's preliminary, meaning that we are in a phase of development, that these things have not yet been incorporated, essentially. So it was more of identifying in which ways we can assess that our models actually abide by the transparency requirement. And the second thing is that when we're discussing end users, we're discussing about clinicians. We consider the patient-clinician relationship in identifying potential ethical considerations, which is a different thing than all the other, especially for transparency, have targeted the needs for the clinician. In this aspect, to correlate it a bit with the question of the topic now, it's that it's very important to have different ways, not only to provide clear explanations, guidance, etc., and documentation that is really understandable of the processes, but also to somehow assess that this is actually working, like the comprehensibility, somehow to measure this comprehensibility, or at least to have some kind of feedback loop that may trigger checking things or making things better. This is the concept. I think that if Irina wants to talk more, and again, this is work done in preliminary stage. We don't yet have any results or the in place.
I don't know if Irina, you want to join in. Otherwise, I'll pass the floor to Agni. No, to Francesca first. Sorry. So Francesca.
But if Agni's question was directly connected to what Christina was saying, I'll pass the floor because. Okay.
No, actually, I would reply to the previous question.
Yeah. So I wanted to answer more broadly about taking into account the patient point of view. And as per MES-CoBraD, our project is not focused on patients, but on clinicians, because the platform is aimed only at clinicians, and patients will never access to it. But nonetheless, we try to integrate the patient point of view, introducing a care ethics approach into our ethical framework. As you know, care ethics is an approach to ethics, to ethical reasoning that it's not opposite, but we may say it's complementary to principlism, and puts at the center of the reflection what is that it's truly human and is relationships. No? And so we thought that trying to introduce also some requirements directly deriving from a care ethics approach could help in keeping AI more human-centered, and to integrate the aspects of the relationship doctor-patient and also patient-caregiver, for example, into the design and development of the system. I have to say that it's a quite difficult and complex task, because we didn't completely succeed in this, because care ethics requirements are typically more, fluid and gray than classical, for example, trustworthy AI guidelines and the requirements that derive from them. But I think that it's something that should be, we should keep trying, because translating them into technical requirements, it's really difficult, okay? But I think it's possible, and it could be a good way, a good approach to incorporate this point of view, the relationship, the patient, their point of view, the need for care, that it's at the heart of medicine in some way.
Agni, you had the question before, or did you remove your hand?
Yeah, I would like to reply to, yeah, actually I did remove my hand, or I did. I don't know what happened. Maybe I removed. No, who will leave behind? So I was thinking that, yeah, for example, in our case, we assume really high illiteracy, in the sense that the patient has to have access to the internet, has to be able to, use the app and report also his symptoms that he understands and can identify it clearly using questionnaires. That is all sorts of assumptions that we have to, somehow document very well, and then say, okay, if all these assumptions are met, then things can be evaluated in a certain way. So I was thinking that, and also we have many problems with the language and the culture. So, for example, in Estonia, it seems that the patients are less honest in reporting their symptoms sufficiently, compared to Italy or the Netherlands, where self-management is very common practice, and they're very used to deal with their problems alone. So also this is something we have to account for.
Okay, thank you. Christina?
I'm sorry, I don't know if I will, this question is relevant, but I was very interested in the care ethics approach. I wanted to ask this question. And again, because principle-based frameworks in healthcare especially tend to miss, for example, some very sensitive aspects of the patient-doctor relationship. And I really find it very, very interesting that you had this initiative to incorporate this approach. And my question would be more on if you had any insights on how such systems affect how the clinicians feel about how it impacts their care. If there is any insight on this aspect from this perspective, not just from having some principles like human oversight and for example, for us it was compromising the authority or certain types of these questions, rather than more experience based and focused on the relationship with their work.
Well, we asked our clinical partners about this, because one of the risks that we introduced in our risk assessment was exactly this. How the clinician's approach is modified by the use of artificial intelligence. And quite surprisingly, I have to say, for us, they said that for them it will not change anything. It was completely indifferent. and we insisted, how can it be? And we try to explain our point of view that the introduction of AI was a huge difference and could introduce biases, etc. And in fact, speaking about this, of course, they saw our point of view, but their approach was it's a machine like a tool like other ones that we already use in our clinical practice. So when you use, for example, an X-ray machine, no, it's something mediated by a machine, and we are accustomed to we know this, and we are accustomed to deal with this. And with the AI is exactly the same thing. We have to say that in MES-CoBraD, I mean, we had an expert system, more or less old style, so the clinician could intervene in more or less quite all the phases of the system working. So it's not, I mean, machine learning and artificial intelligence as we imagine it, but I was nonetheless very surprised about this answer.
Okay, thank you. If we can keep 5 minutes to continue into this and then move to the open discussion, that would be nice. Aldis, then Mercedes.
Yeah, I will be very, very, very fast. Just connected to what Francesca was saying, I had the same experience more or less, because also what our clinicians said, also in other projects with a lot of digital medicines here. So what they say is, yeah, I have other instruments that I have to trust in. So they say the same, and also even if I don't use that machines, also my mind is biased. So they answered the same. The only thing that where I saw their point of view that it is different or more attention to these is, for instance, that our system, for instance, example, has an alerting system. So the real world data that come to them, their attention was more focused on that. That if I have this data, I have to manage them, and not only in terms of overload, but also in terms of okay, if the patient really has an urgency, I have to intervene, and there is and again the change management. There is not yet the possibility to really include it into the clinical practice. So I totally agree with you that their attention was focused not really on the responsibility of using the AI if the final decision is theirs, but in managing this huge amount of data that now is not really um, it's not really possible for them to have this, I don't know, 44 hours, 7 days per week to check the dashboard with the alerts and so on.
Yes, so as a clinician, I agree with your clinicians because it's our daily work. So we are constantly integrating things in our practice. So when you receive a patient, the physical examination, the X-ray, the value labs. So you are constantly integrating many inputs, and your final judgment comes to a decision. So integrating AI in this can make our life easier. So it's not really a change in the way we are working. So I think, as you say, so integrating the workload that this AI is causing us is the real challenge, and also the next step, and I think in this we will be more reluctant, is the alerts, if the alerts are going directly to the patient. and not filtered by the clinician. So, and I know this is not our project, but there is other projects that are coming to empower more the patients. And of course, the AI systems should be refined, but there is some projects that are working on directly contact the patients with some alerts and see how they can manage their own disease. And I think this is not a completely wrong path, because the patient should be empowered and should be be part of the disease and the solution, but we should find a good balance, because it will we would have also less workload if the patient is more focused on their disease and they can manage some aspects of them. And in heart failure, we try to do that, and the education of our patients is very important to prevent hospitalization. So I think that this next step to direct inform the patient is where we would find some clinicians that are going to be more reluctant.
Okay, thank you all for this very interesting discussion. Actually, if you have more questions for the other, you can keep them. Maybe we'll have time. But first, we had a first question from the audience. For the people still attending, you can either put your questions in the chat or raise your hand. But the first question we had is: the technical and operational challenges experienced by all three projects are fairly similar: data availability and integration, lack of harmonized formats and standards. As the projects precede the implementation of the European Health Data Space, do you think that a functioning European Health Data Space would have made things easier, and how? I don't know who would like to answer that first. Yes, Irina?
Yeah, maybe I can start on this one. So my thoughts, of course, it will definitely help on the data side, and it will also on the AI part. It will enforce regulatory standards for AI explanations, pushing actually for harmonized and transparent AI models in healthcare. But I think it will still be a challenge for it won't solve the black box problems in research for deep learning models, for example. So research further into explainable AI techniques will still be necessary. And yeah, it won't really help create a concept of how an AI explanation is good or trustworthy. Yeah, this is my point of view, but it will definitely help in promoting user-centered design and human AI interaction.
Thank you. Serge?
Yes, well, I have very different thoughts as well on this topic. I think having a European data space for health data would be good in terms that we have already agreed standards, and that might help that we don't have to do ad hoc transformation of existing data. It would be kind of hopefully be an established process into a common data format, and this way have a better basis, so have more qualitative data in some sense that is already more harmonized. That would help. It would also maybe help if we don't have to for the training of the models, that we can really bring together more easily anonymized data to do this training of the models. So that would be useful. On the other hand, for the type of solution that we have designed, where we want to deploy these predictive models in the local hospitals, we would need to connect them to the, let's say, the incoming data on a daily basis. So we would have the need to have this transformation processes implemented in the hospitals. The point is a bit, so at least we had very diverse infrastructures in the project in the different hospital sites. So we would maybe, my fear is a bit that we would have those hospitals that have those transformations into a common standard already integrated, those would easily benefit from the solutions we are proposing, and the other ones would be left out more easily, which is maybe a critical thing. It could help to, if the solutions we develop are useful, that there's a, let's say, this would create a pull that those hospitals think about how to improve their infrastructures inside in order to be compliant with the European Health Data Space. Yeah, but this is still something, yeah, these are all the different thoughts that come up when we talk about this European Health Data Space.
Yes, Agni?
Yeah, maybe I can integrate as we had this experience at a hospital. Yeah, I think for sure from the modeling point of view would be nice to have such a data space. But at the same time, apart from the of how much inclusive it's going to be, because every hospital has to have a data science department that, I don't know, or an IT department specified on standards and so on. And I don't know if this is possible, probably not. It's also another aspect that, for example, in every study and pathology, usually you consider a certain population with specific criteria. So I think to be able to extend such study in a huge, I think you need many points, and you have to guarantee that you capture all these conditions you need to have to learn. So it's not that trivial. So just putting, let's say, all the historical data of the hospital around the world would be nice, or Europe. It would be nice already, because then we can experiment on the modeling and try to draw conclusions. It's more or less what is happening in the AI world outside. You know, they just collect everything and they have tons of data, and they can manage to draw conclusions very generalized. But when we speak about clinical data, it's not that simple, because even the biases, for example, in our case, in Gemelli Hospital, is a third order, third level care hospital. So arrive patients that there are not, usually they have already some history, they're more complex, they can get prescribed more expensive medications for rare diseases and so on. So, but I want to say that yes, it would make sense, but if it happens in a very broad scale and with enough data that you can draw conclusions that you can generalize, it's not gonna be controlled to what you learn. This is what I'm saying right now. It will be harder clinically.
Okay, thank you. Any other reaction?
If I may, I think that the huge improvement in having a European data space and using it for projects like ours would be that to participate in the European health data space, you have to conform to certain standards and requirements. And you know that from the beginning. No? So it will have made much more easier, no? All the problem of how to share data also between partners, because you knew since from the beginning what you had to do to gather and prepare the data for sharing and also how to access the data, because, for example, in our case, of course, everything had to be privacy preserving and blah, 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 blah. But in the end, we had huge difficulties in putting all data into a common data lake as it was foreseen at the beginning. No? While with European Health Data Space, you didn't have to reinvent the wheel. You knew from the beginning. And so in this sense, it would have been easier because an entire part of the research necessary to achieve the project goals would have been, in some sense, already preprocessed. So my answer is yes, but knowing that from the beginning, when you are in the project design phase.
Okay, thank you very much for all your answer. I don't know if from the audience we have any pressing questions. Otherwise, I have one for you that Agni already touched, which is what about digital literacy for patients and for healthcare professionals?
Well, I mean, this is the problem of digital divide that is strongly connected also with the preceding question, who are we leaving behind? No, because it's of course when you go in this direction, also, for example, introducing these novelties into healthcare systems, and so they're no more experimental, they are made, they are translated into practice, into day-by-day practice. You really risk that a consistent quantity of people, both clinicians and patients, are left behind. No? And so if you and it's not true that we live in a digital world and so everyone is digitally literate, because, for example, I have two daughters that know perfectly how to use some cell phones apps. They don't know how to use a PC, a laptop, a computer, because it depends. It depends on what your experience is and what your daily practice is. So, of course, a formal training for clinicians will be necessary so that they can learn to use these tools in a proper way, but also for patients if this becomes a mass action. No? And so you should begin in schools, ensuring that all people can use and approach these tools and these opportunities in the proper way.
Thank you. Alicia?
Yeah, no, I have similar opinion, and once maybe it is slightly better for the clinicians, even if it is not true at all. I mean, also among clinicians there are differences in the in these due to the age, but not only. While of course talking about patients is even more critical, because there is a lot of diversity. Talking about the literacy, I think the digital literacy, I think that if possible, it is slightly easier, because we can do something to improve it. It won't be enough, but we can do some trainings we are doing, and this is again an increase of workload. For instance, here we have some nurses that are really specialized in it and that do this in their routine. They enroll patients and dedicate time to explain to the patient how to use the application and to do the first task together. So we can start, we can do something also for the clinicians. We can do training sessions, we can give materials, we have videos, we can help in giving support in case of need. And it is something. Not enough, but it is something. And I also think that probably going on, this is real the first years, decades of these. So going on, as also Francesca was saying, the training and also at the schools will improve, will be increased in this sense. So maybe it will become better. So again, I'm not saying that we will solve it. It is a problem still. But what I see more and more difficult is the digital divide linked not only to the literacy, but to having a proper device, having connectivity. This is much more difficult to solve, in my opinion, because we don't really, for instance, in Estonia, we provided some tablets to the patient that don't have a smartphone. Okay, but this is possible in a study with few patients, not in clinical practice. So this is much more difficult, in my opinion, to solve.
Thank you. Mercedes?
Yes, of course, I completely agree with Alice. And we are trying not to leave many patients behind, but of course, the median age of the patients we are including in the retention trial is lower than usual heart failure patients. And we are trying to involve also the caregivers, because sometimes they have a daughter or partner who is more digital friendly, and this is the main options. We have to try not to leave some patients behind, but of course, despite our efforts, the median age is lower than expected, and probably the when we would analyze other features, we would find that we are including an elite of our patients.
Thank you. Agni?
Yeah, just on that, I think regarding medical devices, so right now we're using the Garmin, the smartwatch, and also the phone. So right now the studies are made in this way. Maybe when there's going to be a process that is in the clinical practice, that the patient goes away from the hospital with his kit of monitoring, or I don't know. For sure, also from a regulatory point of view, and really state level, maybe you could have for fee or paying few all the kit, and that might not be anymore the phone. I don't know. Might be just a device that does everything, and maybe move the costs of the too many visits and exams to providing digital tools. So, but this is just my thoughts. I mean, but I think it should go to this way, because to this direction, because then for sure not everyone would be able to pay and have the devices and of course also the training to use them. So it has to be part of the process, I think.
Francesca?
Yeah, it's interesting what Agni was saying, but I was thinking while she was talking that this could end in having less people working at the hospital, no? Because I mean, it's less doctors, less people who answers to phone calls, and this is a little bit disquieting, if you think, because it's impacting on people lives, no, on people jobs, and it's a direct effect of digitization, of the introduction of artificial intelligence tools, but it is strongly double-sided. And of course, I mean, one direction in which it could lead is that, less phone calls, less doctors to interpret what the data that comes from the devices. So more and more aspects taken care of by AI systems. And so the medicine that becomes less and less human. So it's a scenario, and dystopic scenario, but not so distant if you think about it.
If I can just reply, no, actually, I was not meaning that, because I think this should be granted to patients that are chronic and really need that. So of course it's not going to be for me. I'm healthy, so I don't need anything. But I guess patients that are really critical, or for example heart failure patients that have a pacemaker and progressed condition, it will be really helpful for them to understand that maybe their liquids are much more than what they think, and just call or be faster to ask for help also, because right now it's not that easy. I mean, you might call in a call center and it's, I think, will be better. Of course, we have to be careful also to the aspects you mentioned, and also I have the feeling that the jobs will be transformed, not reduced. So you should do something that is more digital and not anymore make phone calls. Maybe you have to watch a dashboard, and if needed, you call the patient. But I don't think that they will be reduced. They will be different, probably. This is my impression.
Thank you, Serge. And I think after that, we move to the last question in the chat.
Yeah, I wanted to add on what Agni was saying. So currently we think about we need a smartphone to do this deployment, because it's a programmable thing where we can develop something for and then give it to the patient. But for other chronic diseases, you have specialized sensors that are given to these patients, and they are paid by the health insurance companies. And so I think when we have developed something that is really useful for the patient, then think about how to reduce it in size to have a very small, and then if you have a mass production, also a low-cost device that then you can give or prescribe to specific patients that have specific chronic conditions. And then I think we can, by this, try to reduce this problem that we leave people behind, because we can give something to them and it's still affordable. I think this is, of course, in a project, this is difficult to do, because we're trying to develop something and see if it's really useful. But we cannot go the whole process to a final product in 3 years. And the other point about that there are less clinicians required, I think currently we face the other way, right? We don't have enough anyway to take care of all the patients. So if we can somehow reduce the let's say the very high workload for those clinicians by, let's say, reliable AI techniques, I think that would be better for everybody. Because you have clinicians that are less tired, that are less overworked, and so on. And this would also be for the benefit for the patient, because a clinician that is not overworked is much more helpful when the patient sits in front of it than otherwise. I think that's it's more the benefit we could take of that.
Yes,
Thank you.
sorry.
No, I wanted to pass to the last question, maybe I can ask this one and then you can answer both, Mercedes. The last question we have is, do you think the global race for AI leadership, including in healthcare innovation, poses a threat to the human-centric, ethically focused approach taken by you in this project promoted in the EU? So it's also pretty close. So
Yes, thank you. So I don't see, and I think many of my colleagues, clinician colleagues, think like me. I don't see AI as a threat, because I think with a good integration in our daily work, it can help us a lot to be more focused on what is important, to be more focused on our relation with our patient, reducing our workload. And so I don't think AI is going to replace us, but probably doctors using AI are going to replace doctors that are not using it. And yeah, I think there is there is a fear, global fear about AI, but I think if we use it with logic and with ethic, it can be very beneficial. And I think this is the lead we are trying to move forward with these kind of projects.
very interesting. Thank you. Christina and then Agni.
Some thoughts on the last question. I think that it's not only about posing a threat. It's a question of how it could be impact the human-centric, ethically focused approach in EU projects. I don't know. It's my thoughts are on regulatory harmonization. That we do have some stricter rules or some established frameworks that do not apply everywhere, let's say, or have different arrangements, and this poses many issues. We are getting very much better with harmonization, for example, in relation to the GDPR, but we have two main frameworks, one for the AI and one for cybersecurity, which is an integral part of every solution. And we do have very specific requirements that would be a problem in this, from the worldwide perspective. But at the other side, this is also very, I find another way is to see it not as a threat, but as a way of achieving this harmonization, like quicker and pushing for it. Some thoughts.
Yeah, so always answering to the trying to just share some thoughts. So I think, for example, I work also in another European project that all this global race of LLM and so on is integrated. So, or they try to do so with agents that help clinicians to create data sets and using virtual agents and in typing in a descriptive way the inclusion criteria of the cohort they want to consider, and then this creates them a data set. So what I want to say that there are two worlds that are apart, I think. So one is doing something very general and is very good for certain use cases that we can also profit from that. But clinical research by itself is totally another thing that is not yet there into the same, let's say, level of maturity because of the data availability, and also what I explained before, that it's not that trivial to put together populations and study and draw conclusions. So I don't think it's a threat at all. And actually, we need both approaches because we consider more the human aspect because by nature the problem is defined this way. Instead, they don't, because they don't need to. So it's fine, I think.
Thank you, except if there is any pressing reaction. I think we are coming to a close because it's already almost 12, so I think I'm going to free you soon. thank you very much for all the interesting discussions, presentation. I think I learned a lot. I hope you also did. Thank you very much to the audience for being with us. And I invite you also to follow the project channels and check our websites if you don't know the projects. And yeah, the recording will hopefully be available soon, and we'll post that on the YouTube channel. And I wish you all a very nice day, and thank you to all our speakers.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
Have
you
a
very
nice day.
much.
No,
Thank you.
been
Bye.
really
Bye.
interesting.